Alright, in this tutorial today we're going to look at Mustang Sally, the Commitments version. It's a great tune to jam out to on the piano and an easy form to follow as it's essentially a 12-bar blues doubled. So how you play might depend on your context. So if you're playing in a band or if you're playing solo or just accompanying a singer, you might have to play different parts depending on your arrangement. So this tutorial aims to empower you to create your part by looking at different hopping patterns, melodies, riffs, and improvisation ideas for you to create your own part to suit your arrangement. So we'll kick it off with the drum part, which will never stop, so we can practice in the pocket and learn in the groove. So let's look at that drum kick snare pattern. So this is the kick snare pattern, snare on 2 and 4, and some syncopated kicks just after the first snare and just before the second snare. When we add our hi-hats in, it's outlining the subdivision. And the open hi-hat happens on 3N. So that's the essential drum groove that happens. It changes slightly just leading into the break. So da-da-da. And then it slams on the break and hits on beat 4 and back into the groove. Cool, so it's a very 8th sort of groove there. Not really subdividing much further than that unless there's fills. When there are fills, it's quite straight and on the beat like you're hearing now. It's just easier to listen to than play them. Alright, now let's look at the bass line. So you can hear it's playing with that syncopated kick. Let's play the form. 1. So there's 8 bars of C. And it just follows this pattern. 5, 6, 7, then into F. Same pattern, we're just playing the first note lower. Then back into C. Then into G. A 2-bar break, 1, 2, 3, and back into that riff. And at the end of the form, there's often some sort of feel that the bass player does. Like that one. So the only other thing to talk about in bass is there's often some creative ways that they change from chords. So it could kind of head into a different chord chromatically like that. But it's often playing with that sort of syncopated idea. Another thing that the bass does in the 3rd and 4th time is it alternates this bass riff like this. So so like that. Okay, so that's the bass line. Now let's look at the guitar part. So this is essentially it. The key thing is that it's hitting just before the beat for and 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2. And then we do the same thing on F. And the only other thing that the guitar adds is this little strum on the top strings. Then the break, and we'll do that. I only do that top bit every second time. Now, an alternative for the guitar, and often what I hear guitarists play, is this slip into C. So I could do that. I'll add those top notes in. So that's essentially what the rhythm guitar's doing, just to kind of lay down that groove. Alright, so now let's talk about the piano. So, essentially we've got 3 chords, C, F and G. So here's our C, here's our F, here's our G, and here's our C. Now what we're going to do to make them bluesier is to take them to 7th chords, and the easiest way to do that, I never really hear 7ths played in root position like that. I rarely do it unless the song specifically has that particular voicing. So what I do is take that root note, down a tone, and now I've got a C7. And I can play with rhythms with that shape. Do the exact same shape with the F, and then the C, and the G, and into F. And then there's a break, and then we're back in. So that's the very first thing I'd have a little play with, making your major chords 7th chords like that. Now we can talk about how we can actually move those chords around. So we've got this underlying scale, which is C mixolydian, which is all white notes with this black note at the top. And we can actually take that shape and move it up and down the scale. Often these first 3 chords here are the most common, but we can go up, further, we can go down if we want, and we can make patterns with that. Now when we get to the F, because this is quite a big part of that F7 chord, we have to take that E natural and make sure that we don't play that E natural. Scale, but just using E flat instead of E natural. And they're the parallel chords we can use there. And then G, all white notes. And then we've got F, which is all those 2 black notes there. So with that in mind, we can create patterns, and let's do it over the form. One thing I'll do too is add some grace notes into that 3rd. So that's quite a common sound in that blues thing. Alright, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and. So my left hand's not playing anything solid, it's just kind of feathering on ghost notes, just to help me feel that groove. So using that same pattern, but just flattening that E natural. Two, three, four, 1, 2, 3, and. So that's how I would kind of like jam on that form there. Now other parallel chords we can use the first inversion shape as well. So we can kind of alternate those 2 shapes if we want. See how I've kind of playing with those shapes. We can do chromatic lead-ins. Sort of shape. One, two, three, and. Okay, so that's kind of the idea of using those parallel chords. Talked about grace notes. Now let's talk a little bit about rhythm. So essentially we can kind of just think of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and what I'm trying trying to do is push out that syncopation. So I'm kind of sort of accenting those offbeats. So just feeling that syncopated eighth notes. So you might want to have a play with those as kind of like a little exercise, just so you can kind of feel those. And then it kind of comes out and you're playing a bit more naturally. Alright, now we can also feel it in triplets. So, da-ka-da-da. And we don't really play that in the groove much, it's more for the feels that we'll cover later in the tutorial. So just feeling da 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 da. So that's the idea of feeling the groove in triplets. And we can also feel it in 16s, but rather than play on every 16, which is really, I could just do it, but it's probably a little bit tricky to maintain in there. I would normally kind of feel like two groups of those 16s. So da 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 da. So just using the left hand to do coast notes, so you can hear that 16th subdivision. So that's that idea of feeling it in 16, so you can kind of have a little play with grooving there. Now you might have noticed I've started moving away from those chords all the time, but that's kind of like my fundamental thing, and I might sort of break it up with lines in the right hand. Alright, let's talk about some of the other piano techniques that we can use. So first of all, let's look at the scales that underpin all this. The C blues scale is used throughout this song. The melody is made from the blues scale. The licks at the piano player from the blues scale. So that's a pretty important scale to get down. I think of it as two shapes here, exact same shape here, and then the blues note in the middle. And you can hear that's got that kind of bluesy texture. So it's a nice sort of grace note there. The other scale that's used quite a bit is the major pentatonic. And again, because we've got this major third, and what sounds cool is this flat 3 slipping into it. So I almost hear that as the major blues note. We're kind of using a mixture of both scales. When we get to the F, we've got to avoid that E natural. So it's more like the C blues on the F, and then we're back to... And on the G, we can use this blues over those. So essentially we pretty much stay in the C blues scale, but just hinting on some of those major pentatonic notes when the progression's in C. Now another technique we can think about is double stops. So if we have a phrase like this, we can do it with a tonic on top. Whoops, but yeah, you get the idea. One of the first phrases that happens in the piano is this one. So that's a double stop where we're just hammering on a top note on the phrase. You can also do double stops with other notes at the top, like the flat 7 or the 6 on top, like that. Okay, so that's the double stop. Another technique they use is the octave. And often it's just going up and down that blues scale, or major third there. Just to thicken it up, I'm adding a chord in the left hand. I've got two options for each chord, so I'll put them in the sheet music for you to analyse if you want, but I'll either use this shape, the C9, or this shape, the C13. Or I might use this shape, the F9 or the F13. And I'll often just go to the smoothest change, so back to the C9 or that shape. And then we've got the G, so we've got this G9 or G13. I'll just play that a few more times. So they're the two shapes I'm kind of using for each chord. And I'll use the inversions that have the smoothest transitions to each other. See what I mean? Okay, and I'll combine that with the octaves. So we've got... So that's the idea of using octaves as a bit of a technique there. Now the other major technique is these trills, so when you shake between two notes. So with this one I'm kind of attacking it with these notes above it and slipping into that. 3, 4, and I'll often hit it before the beat. 2, 3, 4, like that. Now you could do trills with all sorts of intervals as well, and often octaves. Alright, so they're our main kind of piano techniques that we might use throughout. Now what we'll do is we'll play through the melody so you can actually see how it relates to the blues scale. And I might try and chuck in some of those techniques like double stops or octaves just to make it a bit more interesting. One thing I'll mention too is a lot of the times in blues you've got this sort of E natural and the E flat. And when you're singing in that soul genre, you're almost in between those two notes. And it's really hard to replicate that on piano because when they're singing it, it's kind of in the crack there. So Mustang Sally, see how they're kind of bending into that E natural? So the best thing we could really do is kind of a grace note into it. So 1, 2. Excuse my singing, but it helps me get the notes. So it really does help to sing and play. It gives you intentionality with your note. Sounds, just sing along because that really helps. So if you're covering those harmonies, they're just major triads, but in an inversion. And then F to E flat and at this point we've got this horn line, which is E, D, B flat, and they sustain those notes. I'll just play that a few times. So if you don't have horn players in your ensemble, you might have to cover those lines. Now because the piano doesn't sustain naturally, I'll often sort of shake them and give them a little bit of a crescendo. Or you could play them on the beat. Like that. Alright, so that's kind of the main sort of melody. So if you needed to cover that, that's how it all goes. So let's look at these great piano licks that happen in the Commitments recording. Now the first thing to mention is these fills only happen around the vocals, so never over the top, usually in the fourth bar or leading into a chord change. So we'll cover them in the order that I hear them in the recording. So very first lick I hear is this kind of slip into the third and then slip up to the tonic. I'll try and play each lick 4 times. And then there's this lick here which goes ah. So it's just slipping into the 5 and then slipping down that blues scale. And okay, the next thing I hear is this kind of octave bounce sort of sound, and that's where it's sort of going up. I'm just kind of feathering on the 3rd and 7th in the left hand. So it's kind of playing some syncopated 16s with octaves. Okay, next lick I hear is after the first Ride Sally Ride. Ride Sally Ride. So that's just a double stop, but using this double brace note into. Ooh, that was a bit sloppy. And ah. I've lost it now. And ah. Something like that. So it's basically a double stop phrase there. Alright, and another lick that comes after that is after the F. So, ride, Sally, ride. So all that's happening there is this kind of first inversion B flat, but it's how we're feeling that rhythm. Ba, 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 ba. 2, 3, 4, ba, 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 ba. Okay, and then this is our lead into the G7. 1. So it's basically an octave lead up starting on the 1 and 1 and 2 and 3. Stuffed it up a bit. 2, 3, 4, 1. I'll play the wrong note in the left, but you get the idea. That's another thing. And then leading us back into the horn line, we kind of add this sort of trill there. So I'm gonna be wiping those sleepy nights. And that's where that comes in. Alright, another lick we hear is this kind of roll lick. So that's... Let's slow it down. So we've got... It's hard to slow it down in that groove. So I'm basically playing F to E, this E flat and G, then slipping down a C major, and then double stop and landing on the 3rd. 4, 1. Like that, okay? Awesome. Now, what else do we hear? We hear these triplet octaves, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. I've lost the phrasing, but that's kind of the idea of what happens in that second verse. That's the one. All right. So that happens. Now another little thing that we hear is after the break. Sorry, I'm jumping around. I'm just calling out the main licks that in the order that I hear them. So in the break, early morning, I'm gonna be. They play this chord. back into the C. So what that is, it's playing a tritone substitute. It's like a D flat 7. It's the same third as 7 of the G, but it's just played on D flat, which is also a semitone above the C, and then it resolves to the C. And to make it even more clashy, we're playing an E flat major on top of the D flat, which is called an upper structure. I'm gonna be wiping those sleepy nights. So that's how that works. All right, and then where we were doing those bouncing octaves before, there's some licks that kind of basically bounce like that. So they go like this. It's not exactly like that, but you get the idea. It's that kind of bouncing. So you can kind of play with that sort of cross rhythm as you're playing lines. Like that. Often resolving is how it all works, so if you can make sure you kind of land on that major third on the start of the bar, it's going to sound really awesome. Okay, then there's a second chorus where all that's really happening is the piano's doing these triplets. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. So that's that first one. And the next one goes into the F, so it's kind of starts here and chords here. 2, something like that. Heading into the A, and then we have this really crunching chord. I hear it as like a B flat 13 with a sharp 11, which is really cool sound. 3, 4. Or I think it lands on the 5th hatchet. Like that. And then we've got another kind of triplet octave feel, so it goes one of these early mornings, or something like that. I think it starts here. Can't remember where it lands. Maybe on the G. We'll aim to land it on the G. And that takes us into the last kind of thing just before the coda. Oh, I missed one. We've also got this kind of vibe just before the last G. We've got so it's just kind of walking up. Early morning. Cool. And then at the end, we're just basically playing on octaves. And across the beat like this. And there's a really cool line in the coda. I'll see if I can remember it. And 1 and 2, 3, 4. So it's basically taking those parallel chords, but playing them really syncopated off the beat. And I think it comes off the 4. It goes into 3, 1, 2, and 3. Oh no, into 2, sorry. 1 and 2, 3, 4, and Try it again. 1 and 2. 1 and 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. Get this right now. A 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3. 1 and 2, 3. Cool. So there were all the key licks that you can hear in the piano. So I hope that gives you some ideas of some of the things you could do in improvisation. But I really recommend that you take those core elements, those scales, those double stops, those octaves, those trills, and those rhythms, and come up with your own combinations and your own feels, because it's not about learning the exact feels on the recording. It's about jamming and having a good time and creating a lot of fun with these lines. One last thing we'll do before we wrap up this video is look at the horn lines, because sometimes you might have horn players with you, sometimes you might need to cover those parts. So we've talked about that main horn line, which is the key thing that you'll need covered. Now, all that happens in that first verse is the sax is just leading chromatically into the root notes. Now, I'm actually going to use an organ sound for this. I don't really like the sound of fake horns, so I'm just kind of using that. So into the F. So I think you get the idea with this part. And then leading into the C, using that. And then we just hold on the G. Now the coolest line of the horn line's coming up. 1, 2, 3, 4, da, da. Okay, now what's really cool about that line, and I probably didn't play it very well, is it's slightly swinging. Which is really cool because the drums are kind of playing it straight, but the horn's swinging. Okay, the next chorus that comes up, the horns do a scoop. 3, 4, So I think of these as long scoops. They kind of have a little bit of a pitch bend, but I'm not going to play that. So we could do volume swells. Doo-doom. Doo-doom. And then the trumpet plays on the third. And then the horn line's just that standard one that we did before. E, D, and B flat. Alright, now the next verse that comes up, and it's the same in the last chorus, there's just this little rhythm pattern. And we've got these. The same kind of vibe. Just using A and C here. And here we've got a little lead. And then we get into that F. And then back to our horn line. Now the next chorus is exactly the same with the horn line. So let's take it into the coda. So they just add these little lines into the coda. 2, 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, 2, and 3, 4. So just adding these little third licks. 2 and up, 2, 1, 2 and up. Awesome. So I hope this has given you some great ideas of how you can jam over Mustang Sally or any soul groove in C. Check out the description for extra resources to